Hello, everybody. It's so good to be spending time with you again. I hope all is well. So here we go. We are into lesson number 5 already, if you can believe it. I know time flies when you're having fun, right? And this lesson is called The Keys to the Kingdom. And so in this, right away, we start getting into this idea of this time that you're going through this course being a journey. And I think there's a great reference point into this that says, sometimes when we start a journey, once we get on it, things look quite different than when we began it, right? I think it was Eisenhower who once said, planning is essential, but plans are useless. And the reason he said that was because he realized once you get out there, things are going to look different than what you originally thought when you were drawing them up. And Jesus references this and talks about this in the second paragraph when it says, even the end result of the accomplishing the degree always seems to be different and much richer than you could have imagined when you began your journey. So I love that point. Goes on in the next paragraph. And by the way, this is on page 56 in my book. I know some of you are not on that page, that book, using a different book, which is fine. In the next paragraph, he starts off, he says, the way of the heart requires a willingness to commit. So again, we're making a commitment to ourselves. We're making a commitment to our divinity. We're making a commitment to the way of mastery. That's what we're doing in going through this material. We're making that commitment. I love it when he says in the paragraph, rest assured, whenever you believe you have not succeeded or completed some decision fueled by a desire, it is because you were simply not wholly committed. I love that. I absolutely love that. Or you decided to change your mind. So I love the idea, just talking about him talking about this commitment, this commitment, this commitment, this commitment. So I think it's beautiful. On the next page, for me, that's page 57. In the second paragraph, it starts off and says, it's worth it to commit to the way of the heart. Yes. Is it worth it? Yeah. And then it goes on to say it culminates with the recognition that you do not live life at all, but rather that life is living through you. I love to think that in terms of me being just a simple conduit. In fact, later in the paragraph, Jesus does use the word conduit, but you're allowing God to live through you. You're allowing love to live through you and letting love do what it needs to do, and expressing through you in every single moment. So I love that. And God starts talking about this, or excuse me, Jesus starts talking about this idea of simply becoming a witness. And that paragraph starts off with, it is worth it to commit to the way of the heart. Later in that paragraph, at the last sentence, it says, in which you seem to be witnessing everything that arises and flows through you and around you from a place of utter stillness. And then Jesus goes on to talk about this idea of non-attachment. So in other words, you observe, you become a really good observer. And I've said that before, that when I went through this, I started to become a better observer. Like I got really good at observing and becoming non-attached to whatever is going on. And in so doing, I also learned how not to judge. So to the best of my ability, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm like anybody else. I'm still working, but I can look at things and don't judge it, right, wrong, or, anything in between, no shame, blame, or guilt. And then I also don't get attached. So I'm not attached to what happens. I'm just letting it flow, letting the energy flow through me. And then later on in the paragraph, where the paragraph says, the rest in such a perception means that you've come to realize that the self that you are, what you are, is merely a conduit through which the mystery lives. I love that. I will gladly let God live through me and express through me and be an expression of the divine. That sounds heavenly to me, personally. All right. So on page 58, we get into the 4 keys that are discussed in this chapter. The first key is the key of desire. Now, there was a lot of time spent in the last chapter on desire, so I don't really feel like diving deeply into that. If you want to read more about desire, it's in the previous chapter, but it is the first key to this process. And one of the things in this section of the book, for me, it's on page 58, the last sentence, and it starts off with it's the beginning of a paragraph as well. It says, so the first stage is a stage of desire. Only by feeling desire and not by suppressing it can you truly begin to move toward the stage of mastery in which the energy of desire always seeks the highest will, which is the will of God for you. So the first key in this process is desire. The second key talks about this idea of intention. So the second key is intention. Desire in time is cultivated through intention. What is your intention? What are you intending on doing? And so I love it because in the same paragraph, it goes on to talk about this idea of becoming distracted. And I love the story he shares about, it starts off within that first paragraph. It says, for you have used time to teach yourself to be distracted, how to be distracted by all the thoughts and perceptions that make up this cosmic soup called your world. All of you have known the frustration of having a desire, and then as soon as you walk out the door, a friend pulls up and says, hey, let's go to the beach. And you never make it to class, right? Even though your desire is to get the degree, you have cultivated the art of being seduced by distraction. I'm going to say that again because this was a huge realization for me when I went through this. And that is, again, you have cultivated the art of being seduced by distraction. In fact, I even made a note. I highlighted it. I put distraction, then I said, pay attention, Mike, because I'm kind of suffer at times from squirrel. Even within divinity, you can get distracted. And so I had to sit back and look at my life and see where those distractions were, and then really ask myself, is this really what I want to be focusing on and putting a lot of my time, talent, and attention to? And so then I started pulling back some things that I was doing to spend more time on focusing on my mastery, my divinity, my internal world versus my external world. Let's put it that way. Okay. So I love the paragraph that says, therefore, it's necessary to utilize time to cultivate intention, for without intention, desire cannot become the crystal clear focus, the laser-like focus that can cut through the dross of this world so a new creation can flow through you. Whew. There's some power in that paragraph. I love it. I love the paragraph. Again, I'm on page 59 that says, therefore, intention in the way of the heart means to utilize each day to focus your attention on the desire of the Christ incarnate. I love that. So we're giving ourselves each day, we're spending a little bit of time focusing on becoming or letting the Christ within us unfold. And that's what I love about that page. All right. On the top of page 60, I start off with this following paragraph. That's how do you apply intention? I think this is really powerful. And my suggestion is in the section of your journal that I suggested you put all the exercises, put this one. This is a really, really important one. So ask daily was my note. What is it I most desire? What am I what am I doing on this planet? And what am I committed to? And that's laser-like focus, commitment to your intention by asking those three questions. I think it's really, really powerful. And then further on down, it just goes on to say this beautiful statement: my intention is to use time constructively for the relearning of what it means to abide in the kingdom of heaven and to fill my function. And you can read the rest of it, but that's a very beautiful affirmation. And again, something to remind yourself of on a regular basis, should you choose. The third key is allowance. And the thing that I want to bring up to you is Jesus is using an example. Well, first of all, he talks about this idea. We've mentioned this before, the idea of allowing versus striving. And so we've already talked about that once, but Jesus brings it up again as a reminder, which he does often. And then he talks about this idea of manifesting a Mercedes, which is really, really fun. But he also talks about why that you might want to consider manifesting something else other than a Mercedes and why that might be something to consider. He goes on to explain that in there. I'm not going to go into that too much, although I found it to be really, really good. Because he goes on to say, well, I'm just going to bring this up. In the paragraph, I'm on page 61, it says, be honest with yourself. Is not your world built on such a premise as these? If only I can make my life look successful around me, then I will be accepted, and then I can love myself at least a little. And that's where the problem is, because some people think that in order for them, to be worthy, that they've got to, manifest the Mercedes, because then society will accept me when I'm driving around a Mercedes. And that's where the mistake comes in. And that's what Jesus is really talking about. I love the paragraph that starts off. It says, in the stage of allowance, we begin to cultivate an acceptance of all things in our experience. And we understand, and later on in that paragraph, it starts off, we understand that all people and events in our lives on a moment-by-moment basis that can best provide us with exactly what we most need to learn or become aware of. You have to understand that when you make this kind of a commitment, you don't have to worry about what your personal training program is. You just have to get up every single day and just trust that whatever's coming your way, whatever person, place, or thing is showing up, whatever resistance there is, whatever frustration, whatever is showing up for you is exactly what is needed. You don't need a whole book printout and say, get through these following 15 things. Just show up every day and your agenda is going to show up for you because of who and what you are and who and what you have asked for. So in this case, it's just showing up on a moment-by-moment basis and trusting whatever's happening. We no longer go into victim. We go into acceptance, and we go into an understanding that you're wanting to learn something, you're wanting to grow through something, a person, place, and thing, even when it's difficult. It's still there for us to learn and to grow from. And what I always say is, when you're going to go through a process like that, the best thing that you can do is just open up your heart and ask, what is the lesson here? I always say this, that it doesn't need to take weeks and months and years and decades to learn a lesson. We can learn them quickly when we're open to it, when we accept responsibility for them, when we stand into our mastery and understand that everything is showing up for our highest and best good. Then all of a sudden we go, okay, so this isn't here to punish me. No, you're not being punished. You're being here. What's showing up is for your greatest growth, your greatest opportunity for expansion. And you've basically asked for it on a certain level, in a good way, not going into blame, shame, or guilt. Remember, we don't do that. Those are not tools for transformation, as I always say. And so you go from there. And I love the paragraph that goes on to say, the messenger could be someone who comes as a grain of sand within the oyster that causes a friction within you that nudges you from your sleep. And you realize that you've been operating out of some very dysfunctional patterns, and you've got to get a better grip upon the truth of who you are. Oh my God. So good. So good. Anyways, on page 62 talks about this idea of allowance cultivates truth. And then also the paragraph that starts off and says allowance means the beginning stages of cultivation of humility and the recognition that you must finally submit to something beyond the intellect. So in other words, we're going beyond the ego. The ego wants to hold us there, demand that it knows the way, demand it knows exactly what it needs to do. Just trust it, and it will lead you to the promised land. And we all know that it never leads us to the promised land. And so it's a surrendering of the ego. So that's what it talks about. You finally submit to something beyond the intellect. So we're going to spirit. We're going from the head, the ego, into the heart, into spirit. And that's what we're using to guide and direct our lives, right? And in fact, it says that we're letting beyond the intellect and control of the egoic part of the mind, because the maker and doer that has been trying to do it all is finally recognized as being inadequate. I put a great big smiley face when I did that. The fourth key, the last thing in this entire process, is surrender. It talks about that at the bottom of page 62. And then finally, what do? We surrender it over to spirit. And in fact, on page 63, not my will, but thine be done, right? So we're surrendering it over to spirit. On page, not a lot on page 63 for me. On page 64, I love the prayer. In the paragraph, it says, I am the one who has chosen to assume the responsibility for the pebble called earth and all of the life that dwells within. That's Jesus. But then he goes on to say this beautiful prayer that you can use, and it says, I and I alone am the source of what I experience and perceive. I'm not a victim of the world I see. Everything I experience, I have called to myself, plain and simple, no excuses, no ifs, ands, or buts. That is the way it is. And I would add, no shame, blame, or guilt, that I accept this reality through all time, space, dimensions, and realities. So I'm covering my butt no matter where the thing lands. I'm accepting it, the whole thing. Because when I do that, then I'm going from victim to powerful creator, right? In the next section of the book, Jesus talks about the importance of humility. I think it's a good chapter. I don't have anything to comment here except on page 65, where he does talk about this idea of there's no such thing as I'm done. I always tell it when somebody says they're an expert, run away, because there's always something more, especially in the spiritual world, growing and expanding. There's so much stuff that's there. So it's not a matter of I'm done. Always be humble, always be open and receptive to what the next thing is. How many times on a Sunday morning do I tell people there's always something else? There's always more, right? All right. So, all right, page 66. Oh, I love this concept towards the bottom of page 66, where it talks about this idea of ruffling other people's feathers. It talks about the world would teach you to become a doormat so you fit in and not ruffle anybody's feathers. But as you become empowered, one way that you'll know that it's occurring is that some people will not like you. Why is that? And it's really simple. Energetically, when you're hanging out and you make a decision to change and go for it, go for your divinity, go for your mastery, you're going to change energetically. And the people that used to like you at a particular energy frequency, you're going to now all of a sudden be a different energy frequency. And the bottom line is people are not going to like it. Not everybody, but there will be people that you'll see in your life that just kind of start to fade away. We bless them, we love them, we appreciate them, but it's just time to move on, and they don't really appreciate that you're moving on, and they may lash out at you, right? I love on page 67, the prayer, source, creator, God, goddess, all that is, Abba, I'm ready to be what you created me to be. I choose to remember that I am effect and not the cause. Thy will be done, knowing that your will is my full happiness. Reveal then the path through which that happiness can be known. For my way has never worked, but your ways always does. So it's just a surrendering to the process. Bring to me whatever it is that I need to learn, that I need to experience in order for my soul to grow even further, and be open to that, right? And then that's really kind of it. So short, sweet, simple, beautiful, powerful, wonderful chapter. And I think I'm excited for you. If there's anything else that I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. You know how to get a hold of me. And I just hope you have a fantastic week and continue your journey on the way through the way of mastery. Blessings to you.